Two, one.
Hello, welcome.
Hello. Welcome to the Stream of Truth. I am Dr. Tassel Faith Shanebrook,
And I'm Sean Kelly.
and today's topic is We Are Not Connected, Unity Consciousness Explained.
Yeah, so this was, I guess, sort of something that I'm sure everyone's seen this in spiritual discussions and all different flavors of them. Um, when people will say we're one, and then other people will be like, "Yeah, that's right, we're all connected, and we're all connected by energy," and they'll explain it like this, that type of thing. And what I'd like to try to bring to the table is that that is a beautiful step in the right direction. Of course, that's a beautiful step to say we're all one, almost one in our struggle, or one in our living, right? As a group, we're connected. But what I'd like to try to help expand consciousness into is the idea that we are actually only one being. We're one entity experiencing itself through all these different facets that basically are pretending to be individuals. So I should actually warn people that this video or this stream topic may be a little bit triggering because um, the ego can get very frightened by the concept of losing self identity, right? So anything that the ego hangs on to as self that gets challenged by some of the ideas that we'll talk about today are gonna feel uncomfortable. This is areas that the ego's like, no, because if I agree to unity, then I'm essentially dissolving the self into the unity. That's when that's when the being becomes crystalline or eternal, is when the self dissolves into unity. And so that's like a Christ-like Buddha type state. And so the way to get there though is to start to know it and see it and then continually build this knowing and then Buddha. Easy, right?
And maybe I could just interject. I wonder how you feel about this. Is it possible to hold both the perspective of the human perspective with the veil and the sort of the trick of,
Right.
oh no, I am my own being, and
That's an
I do have an identity,
amazing question.
and then also hold the larger perspective that no, I am just part of spirit, as we all are. Can we hold both of those paths, you think?
Absolutely. Yes. That's a perfect question. Thank you. We couldn't have planned this better. Um, and I mean that in so many funny ways. But basically, there's two real ways to look at it. Um, so basically, we have a sort of universal mind. And the only way that the universal mind can separate into finity or finite objects is by creating identities. And so Sean is an identity, as is Ka or as is Ra, right? These are identities only. Um, they're sort of distortions from the one is the way to look at that. From the universal mind of the one came the thought I am, and then separated into manyness. But the manyness is an illusion. The manyness is part of the separation that inspires the seeking back to creator or source. So the identity is sort of required. It's required prior to merging to source. So you're always maintaining identity. What happens when you become crystalline is now you understand basically the archetypal mind, and start to inhabit basically what could be soul aligned characteristics within the archetypal mind. So basically, each being has a sort of orientation as to what is virtuous behavior and what's not. And that's liquid, like it's dynamic and shifting all the time. Um, and it'll inhabit those traits and become an identity that inhabits the traits that it finds desirable to inhabit and discards a lot of the traits that don't. And so the trick to holding a unity consciousness is knowing and accepting the entirety of the archetypal mind as part of the self, loved and accepted as a whole unit. And so this is sort of the discipline of the personality, would be called in magical terms. This is where basically God, source, knows it's putting on a costume to go be about in the world. And that's how you start to experience it. So the identity is sort of like a loved costume or mask or, everyday sort of Halloween in a way. Um, because you're putting on this identity that you've constructed very carefully to try to be aligned with your purpose, your soul, whatever your yearnings are. And so you're able to then basically meld this costume, this vehicle into whatever whatever shape or form you want, as well as anything that you want to manipulate. You can then do that, right?
And then we're able to see everyone else as doing this as well, that everyone else is spirit, God in
Yes.
a, a costume.
Not just everyone else, everything else,
Yes.
like the air, everything, right?
Yeah.
So the consciousness, basically everything, even the dead things are alive, with energy and consciousness. And so literally everything seen and unseen, and even in the voids of space where we think there's nothing, um, there's there's still the creator in that energy. Um, in the sort of the microcosm of everything lies the entirety of the universe, the entirety of the original thought. And that's why once somebody realizes the innate power of the infinite creator, they sort of become conduits of this just pure energy sort of thing.
So maybe we can back up and I can just ask you, when did you first really become aware of unity consciousness or embody it yourself?
So I think, like all people that get into sort of spirituality, we hear we're all one stuff. We may hear the we are creator beings stuff, or we're co-creators, which is another just step away, because the creator is to be all, which is harrowing to the ego. So
Mm-hmm.
we'll say we're co-creators, but that's not accurate. We're saying that to step away from taking full responsibility, right? So we're saying, oh well, they did it too. So that's usually how we're using that. We can use it
Mm-hmm.
in positive and negative ways, of course, but what I'm saying is the use of that implies separation, right? So that's when we're speaking from the identity. So that's another way that we can use that to like tie back. Um, but
So
for
I just want to get all this really clear. So when
Yeah,
we talk about say between you and me, that you and you and I have co-created some type of situation,
yeah.
you're saying that's not quite accurate. So how would you phrase that?
Um, the creator uh, divined this experience through us as vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
There's no person really.
Mm-hmm.
That's the person is sort of the costume, the vehicle or the instrument that the creators then plays a tune with. And so this is why the primal distortion of the law of one is the law of free will. Um, Free will is a distortion that enables confusion in separation. After that, you realize there isn't free will. You're only allowing the universe or God source to live through you, and that you're
Mm-hmm.
not actually doing anything or choosing.
Mm-hmm.
And then but at that point, you have to just let everything go to God, basically. And you're knowing that that's what you're meant to do at that point. Um,
So
but
in shamanism, there's a really beautiful term, the hollow bone.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Hollow
that
bone,
hollow bone,
tabula
vessel,
rasa,
vehicle. Mm-hmm.
um, blank slate, all these types, empty vessel,
Yeah.
container, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what our true beingness is and always has been. The thing is that we've forgotten that, and so what we're doing now is remembering that, basically. Um, and when we're that hollow bone, we have no choice but to embrace unity because we are all that is and all that is flowing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, just as humans, when we're talking, I'm not saying that we shouldn't say co-creator or whatever. I'm not trying to be so nitpicky with the language, but I am trying to express that there are a lot of nuances in how we approach creation and how we talk about it that help us inform a unity presence. Um, uh, essentially, what you start to try to do just routinely, the best practice is to look at everything and try to see God directly, and including yourself and your thoughts, experiences, everything. God's doing it. God is it. God's thinking it, or a source, however you want to frame that. And then if you can do that, then you start to just know unity, and then it starts to feel like the universe is just constantly speaking at you, right? Or speaking in your, in your midst.
So one of the questions I have, and I wonder if maybe people listening to this might have the same question, is in terms of manifesting.
Yeah.
Um, how do you see that in the lens of unity consciousness?
Um. So, uh, when the human, there's two stages, I'd say, to manifesting. There's the sort of the kindergarten type level, which is where basically the egoic mind is forming desires and then trying to use manifestation for them and playing with it. And some of the manifestations work, some don't, and there's a lot of playing happen and learning, lots of learning happening. And then the next stage of it is when the entity starts to plan their actual lessening, and they start to choose catalyst based on the catalyst itself, sort of. They start to end up being sort of conscious partners in the lesson forming, with the higher self. They start to sort of, in more accurate way, they start to just see a better picture of what the map potentials are and then move towards those. And so the manifestation no longer, it's no longer really even a conscious thing as far as manifesting path goes. It's more like um, you're making sort of choices between opportunities, but even those choices aren't truly your choice. So there's a layer still of confusion, that it'll feel like we're making choices, um, but at third density we're not able to make choices outside of the veil, really.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little bit confusing to try and describe the next stage of the manifestation. It's more like you're in tune with what the soul is directly sort of yearning to do. And this is why when you awaken, you start to navigate directly towards that. And then you sort of start to stop worrying so much about the other things, uh, the things that you previously were manifesting or working on manifesting, start to sort of fall away. And so it's not that manifestation in the other way is wrong or anything. It's like the stepping stone up towards the manifestation just through an understanding of what I need is coming and it will come in that, if that knowing is there. Then if you're in that hollow bone state, then you won't have a need.
So are you saying that the difference in manifesting in unity consciousness versus when you're not so quite in unity consciousness is that when you're in your egoic identity, you have desires and you are sort of actively trying to make it happen,
Yeah.
thinking about I'm co-creating with the universe and I'm asking for the universe to bring this in and I'm waiting for the inspired action and I'm active. I'm the one making it happen, or I'm the leader of this desire coming in.
Hmm.
And then are you saying that when you're in unity consciousness, that all kind of falls away and there's a knowingness that what my heart does desire is coming through me, that is God's desire, my desire, and more of a receiving mode, more of the, I guess, the
Yeah.
divine feminine
Yeah,
mode.
well, basically, you've totally unified and balanced the divine feminine, divine masculine in that state. So the
Hmm.
polarity of those two is gone. Um, the concept of negativity is gone. Um, so you're not able to need anything, um, but you also are aware of preferences, things that you enjoy are still there, quite there, in human terms. Um, and so you may end up feeling called to do a manifestation practice of some kind, right?
Hmm.
So you may end up still working with manifestation. That may be your calling, right?
Hmm.
To do that. So, but what I'm saying is that you no longer go, oh my gosh, you're no longer usually referencing fear and then that
Hmm.
supplying your desire to manifest.
Hmm.
You're now just manifesting your heart's will, which is the creator's will flowing through you as a vessel.
Yes.
So you're aware when you're manifesting something because you feel it and you know that it's coming. And that's how your intuition starts to become almost perfect, more or less, for your own pathway. That there are still surprises always, but um, your intuition becomes like basically your only trusted resource in previewing the world because you realize that the world revolves around a reality that isn't real, like a layer of reality that is not real. And so it becomes very challenging at that point too because everyone around you is still part of that. Not everyone, but the vast majority of people. Um, and so it's not for everyone. This type of like it takes a lot of work, I would say. Well, I guess some people it just pops open,
Hmm.
but other people it takes years and years of practice. When people have to sit in meditation for years, um, so it goes all over the place. But I encourage everybody to attempt to see the world this way because there is no suffering. When I'm holding that state, I don't worry about anything, and there's nothing, and I don't have to go into meditation or anything. So the more that we do it, the more we can hold that state. Um, when I'm doing these videos and when you're doing these videos, we're basically, I think, in this state.
Hmm.
We're in that flow state. The self, the personality dissolves,
Hmm.
and then at that time we're eternal. So we don't age when we're in that flow. And then
Hmm.
also we are just basically conduits at that stage when we're not fighting ourselves. But even when we're fighting ourselves, it's still the creator confused, right? It's the creator's confusion manifesting.
So there's a lot of peace in this orientation because basically we realize that the universe is flowing through us perfectly, and in a way we can just sort of sit back and just be along for the ride and
Yeah.
take inspired
And
action as it comes
you
up.
can start to see the body, the personality even as more like a video game character or a
Mhm.
toy with that you're playing with, right? And that there's no danger. You're just playing make believe, sort of, as well. You can start to just know that, and that it's not. But you have to be careful with those thoughts because that can lead down a road of emotional detachment and oh these people aren't real and stuff. That's not the case. We want to always embrace life as real because we can be. This is where the simulation theory comes from because this is sort of a simulation, sort of, but it's all alive. It's not we are living entities, right? So that always is super important.
So the question that I started off with asking you,
Oh yeah, sorry.
toggling between these two paths. No, just I feel like you just referenced it in that.
Okay, good.
So we realize this larger perspective that we're this hollow bone vessel, that God is really just living through us, experiencing itself. And at the same time, this vessel that we're in is also a human and having a human
Totally.
experience. And so, for instance, something interesting is that you have said the more you have uh, sort of been present in unity consciousness most of the time, the less attached you have been to, say, your physical body,
Yep.
and maybe the health of your physical body in a way too. And that
Yep.
maybe we can go like too far in inhabiting unity consciousness all the time without sort of honoring the human experience too.
No, I'd say that the opposite is true. I'd say
Hmm.
that at my for me, my goal is to hold it all the time. When it's experienced, uh, mm, it becomes to me self understood that this is the state to be in always.
Can we just like maybe rather than saying like the toggling, can we hold both of them
Totally. That's
simultaneously?
that's what we
Okay.
do.
Okay.
That's what we learn to do. Yeah.
Hmm.
Basically that's what we learn to do. So as we awaken and then we start to get glimpses of what unity might mean. Some of us it takes a long time to get to actual unity consciousness. Others it's shorter, but um once we notice it, we it becomes self-evident to us that that is the goal. That's there couldn't be any other goal as far as consciousness evolution goes. So so if the soul's goal is not that consciousness evolution, there's going to be a bunch of resistance and a bunch of stuff that needs to be looked at first, karmically, whatever it is, in order to get to that. There's the body needs to be able to hold a certain amount of light uh, without distorting it, basically. And so if the soul isn't ready for that, that's totally fine. They're on a different sort of journey, and they may step into it here and there and be like, "Wow, that's nice. That's a nice way to view the world," and then they may go back. But it sort of becomes self-evident, and um, what ends up happening is whether you take good care of your body or not, you tend to continue a lot of the personality traits that you had prior. You don't necessarily awaken to it, and then the habits that you've had are gone or things like that. Some of these programmed things that are deeply subconscious are still rooted in there and messing with
Hmm.
stuff too. So there's a
Hmm.
period of time. So for my example, like my diet, I'm like aware that I'm gonna change it, and I ended up quitting smoking. So there's you sort of end up becoming aware of some of the patterns that you have, some of these other underlying things that are sort of like programmed in, and that type of thing. And so you can progress and continue with negative patterns. There's a yogi I think that smoked until he died. Um, and so, and he was considered enlightened, as I think most yogis are, um, or the yogis that I've read, anyways. The like the more, I guess, famous ones. Uh, so uh, it doesn't always mean that we treat the body perfectly, and it doesn't mean we act perfectly either. Because we still have, if we go into unity consciousness while still having identity issues or personality issues, areas that we're not so in alignment with ourselves, we can carry that in to unity as long as we're ready to step into fourth density. So we have to hold fourth density frequency, um, and then we can do both. And that's why the indigo and the crystal children were born with the dual activated bodies, the yellow ray and the green ray dual activated, so that they can hold the higher frequency and then step into unity while still playing in the uh,
The
the
human.
duality
Mhm.
mindsets. So it gets a little weird though for people going through that.
And would you say that most of us have spent many, 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 many incarnations not in unity consciousness, just pretty firmly planted in the identities of those incarnations? And that was for our soul's expansion
Yeah.
to for creator to see itself in all those different ways. And then there comes a lifetime, and some of us may be in it now, where we are reaching unity consciousness.
Yeah. Yeah. Basically. Yeah. Every soul here. So we're at the harvest right now. So basically, every soul that's here, more or less, is looking to move to fourth density. A bunch aren't ready, and our harvest isn't going to be very big. I don't think.
Can
Um,
you explain what you mean by that term harvest?
oh yeah, yeah, sure. Um, so when a planetary entity graduates into fourth density, beings moving from third to fourth are they take part in what's called a harvest, where they merge into a higher consciousness. They ascend, basically. That's the ascension. Um, the trick to it is that it's here right now for us to step into that and hold that, um, which is really interesting. I don't think we've done planetary transitions like this, uh, in at least in our like logos, in this way where we have beings sort of that are here that are moving into the fourth density frequencies, and that's what they when they talk about the 5D or that stuff. They're talking about, I think, fifth dimension. But anyways, um, it's what was the question again? What was I talking about?
I was just basically asking that if it's the case that we as soul come into all these different incarnations, and a lot of the time we're
Ah, yeah, yeah,
just stuck in these identities, not stuck, but we're just
yeah,
experiencing the identities.
yeah.
And
Basically,
then there comes a lifetime where we really ascend
yeah.
into the next
There,
density.
there are two cases to this. So, what the first case is like a soul that originated on Earth,
Hmm.
and this soul is going to essentially come into third density, and then they'll go through the random generation of experience. This is where there'll be somebody that's like very ill, or there'll be somebody very poverty stricken. They might be somebody very wealthy, but it's random. And then eventually the soul starts to sort of understand what's going on and contributes in the lessons plan and stuff like that. At that point, the one of the incarnations will one of them will pop, basically like a popcorn, and will awaken. And then when that
Hmm.
happens, the soul then is like a full sort of participant in the higher self's plan, the higher self that's already traversed all of it, because time's just a circular now, right? So the higher self's already done all of that stuff. And then the identity is here. So the identity is always sort of moving towards the higher self and eventually merging with the higher self and then merging with source. Um, and so you could see like tassel, maybe tassel like grows into and then ascends into the next dimension after passing from this incarnation, and then does another incarnation, a bunch of them in fourth density or something, and then goes up, and then eventually in mid sixth density merges with the higher self, and then they both turn back, and then they'll graduate up into seventh and merge with source. Um, and that happens for all entities, regardless of anything. That's the path always. Um, there are surprises along the path. There are delays. You can accidentally switch polarity, and it can end up taking, you know, quadruple the time that it took other entities to move that area or that space. Um, and then there are wanderers, though, that have already done that and were likely at around the part of merging with the higher self and graduating into seventh or something like that. Um, that most of them are around that, like sixth density, that decided to come back to third density and do it again, to help, basically. Uh, in the Law of One, they're called the Brothers and Sisters of Sorrow. That's what I am, um, or what Ka is, where we sort of come from. So when there's a large calling, um, then sort of these beings will incarnate and they'll go back and do it again. And so depending on when they arrive and all that, how many cycles, that type of thing, they'll arrive to try and increase the harvest, which is the ascension into, like in my case, positive social memory complex is sort of the goal that I've come here for.
And if listeners want to learn more about this, all of this that you're talking about, is the Law of One the best resource?
Oh, totally. Yeah,
Hmm.
totally. The Law of One is the best resource that I can think of that accurately describes unity consciousness
Hmm.
in a way that uh, is very precise. But it's a difficult read. I would say it's like doctorate level metaphysics probably. So it's a difficult read. Um, but if you dedicate time to it and kind of consume it and then consume it again, you'll start to notice that basically you just pick up more and more and more, and then you start to get it. Finally, we'll get it. If literally, I think if you just read that book over and over, it'll just pop one day. Um, and yeah, so I would recommend that, and that's llresearch.org is their website, and the Law of One's free. You can also listen to all the audio cassettes for the channeling and all that stuff. It's really cool. It's kind of creepy, to be honest.
On LL Research, do they have the like sessions episodes on audio so you can just listen to
Hmm.
them? Okay.
I don't know if they put them on. They may have put them on YouTube or something, but I think they have
Hmm.
links in there, at least.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I think I wanted to go step back just to the holding two personalities, basically holding two viewpoints.
Yeah.
That's essentially what becomes increasingly evident is that you're holding both spaces
Hmm.
simultaneously.
Yes.
Um, and so if you're able to continue to be aware of unity consciousness while doing all your things, that's sort of the goal, is
Hmm.
basically to be holding the personality and molding the personality to being what aligns with you and your environment and how you feel and all the things that you want to change, habits, whatever they are, because you're likely, I mean, if you end up going this way, you're likely to have residue of some kind left over from your programming, right? the human can't really function without programming.
Mm-hmm.
So everything is programming. It's just a matter of like discarding the programming you don't want. I think I've said before, we're a lot like synthetic robots. That's a lot like really what the body is. It's a sort of a synthetic bio robot, more or less. And consciousness is a stream of energy that powers and guides the robot.
Mm-hmm.
Is sort of the way, a good way that you can look at it, as long as you can remember it's not a robot like AI or anything wacky. It's, it's a real flesh. It's life, but
And in a way, we're sort of allowing in God consciousness and or the more earthly human programming consciousness. Like
yeah,
both of those streams are available to us.
yeah, we're basically holding both. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then, but because we're holding the unity consciousness, we're very unlikely to traverse paths that lead far away from that. So we may get a little agitated and say something, or we may do fairly minor outbursts, um, or we may retreat. More likely, we'll retreat because we're pacifist. The more likely we won't lash out with the mouth unless sort of cornered or feel like we have to talk or something.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those patterns might remain, but any outward aggression starts to become unfathomable. Like
Yeah.
you can't
I,
conceive of it as much. So you end up not inhabiting the negative. The negative programming starts to die away. The like fear based or
yeah.
agitated, conflict driven stuff just
Mm-hmm.
starts to fall away because you stop using it because your mindset's totally different.
I'm almost thinking, I wonder if you would agree that the awakening process that so many of us are in is, in a way, we kind of have these two valves within us of the human programming and then the God consciousness. And as we awaken, the God consciousness valve just like really opens up and we're just more flooded with that pure God consciousness, and the valve to the matrix programming just starts to close off more and more.
Yeah, basically, yeah. I think you start to you'll start to realize that you're doing some behaviors that you used to be doing because you were afraid of something, and then
Yeah.
you'll go, but I'm not even afraid of that anymore. So I guess I don't have to do this thing anymore.
Yeah.
And so you'll
Yeah.
start to notice that type of thing too, where that's how you mentioned you fall away from the system, the
Mhm.
matrix. um yeah, unity consciousness and basically unplugs you from all of the manipulation that's possible.
Yeah.
You can't really be
Yeah.
controlled anymore.
Mhm.
Even if you're taken and put in a prison, you're still your own being, eternal, and you would be like probably mystified and wondrous at this weird opportunity, um
Mhm.
to be in a hole. uh
Mhm.
so it makes life quite, beautiful. And not, it's sort of all moments are have a sort of beauty to them. It's maybe a duller beauty than is experienced prior, I would say. In my experience, it's like a little duller, but it's all positive generally. And
Why what do you mean by duller?
the contrast is gone. So
Mhm.
there's nothing's good or bad anymore. So there's nothing that contrasts to show how good something is. So everything is sort of a kind of plateau of good. So
Mhm.
it
Mhm.
feels a little duller, but it is quite good. But what happens
Mhm.
is you become used to how good it is, and it just feels very normalized. So it feels duller, like you just feel fine, basically. That's how you know you're
Mhm.
in alignment. You feel good.
Mhm.
There's no real reason, or you just feel good. Um,
Mhm.
that's usually when you're in a good alignment. Um, uh, so so yeah, you don't end up having the disappointments, but you also don't have the joy, the big pops of joy as much. Sometimes the like big events with the family, like a bunch of stuff happens and sort of the soul sings and stuff like that for sure. Or like if we get reunited after a long time, something like that, like these things totally still um, build up in the body, but that's probably due to a lot of programming as well, right? And in this case, in like us meeting, I think that's a positive thing. So it's
Hmm.
not, it's not an issue, right? So we end up, I think, sort of choosing that. We notice the experience and then we choose our orientation to it because we become aware that the only thing about the experience that is uncomfortable or comfortable is my perception. So I just changed the perception. I just look at
Hmm.
whichever aspect of it. I know that it's not a square. It's more like a cube, or it's a Merkaba, right? It's got so many dimensions to it, and I just pick one that looks better. That's the one that I'll go with, right? So you end up just programming yourself.
And I think what you're at least partly saying is in this unity consciousness, God consciousness orientation, we're able to see every single thing, every single experience as divine and perfect and without a judgment, without a this is good, this is bad.
Yeah, yeah. Basically,
Um,
what in my experience, when things go awry, there's more of a oh this is interesting.
a curiosity.
Yeah, because your
Hmm.
intuition was everything was going smooth, smooth,
Hmm.
smooth as gravy, and then
Hmm.
you run into this barrier, and you're like, oh, am I giving myself a message with this barrier, or is it just a barrier to see if I continue following my pull, or
Hmm.
what is this barrier? It becomes
Hmm.
just interesting,
Hmm. Hmm.
primarily. Of course, we can all the stories can bubble up too when we're triggered and stuff too, and we can fall out of the unity. Like when we get triggered, we our consciousness dips, and like we can't access that anymore. So the goal ends up becoming, I don't want to be triggered. In order for me to not be triggered, I have to heal everything. If never want to be triggered, I have to heal all of it. So in order for me to heal all of it, I have to accept all of it. And then you have to apply that to the external world. Otherwise, you'll just be triggered constantly.
This word curiosity seems to me like a bit of a compass in this path that we're talking about.
Totally.
Like maybe a way to even integrate the meta spiritual perspective and the human perspective. Like for me, it kind of cements it together that if I can just be, I'm like on an adventure and I can just be curious about everything that I'm experiencing,
Yeah.
a little bit zoomed out.
That's basically how Source, that's the best way I could describe how, when I'm in that state, how I'm seeing everything. It's just a little curious about it.
Yeah.
Pretty,
And this
it's
was the
new.
whole
Everything's
point.
new.
And this was the whole point of the creator, right? It's because the creator was curious to experience itself.
Right.
So
That,
maybe when we're in that curious orientation where we are really in that God consciousness, that's the whole point.
yeah, I see. So curiosity, so the feeling of curiosity is the opposite polarity, I would say, of the uncertainty that causes most fear.
Yes,
So
exactly.
that's the other
Exactly.
pole. And so literally sometimes we're curious because we're not scared. Other times we're
Yes.
uncertain and afraid because we're not curious. But
Yes.
if we just switch it and go, "Oh, I don't have to be scared of this. I can just be very curious." And it's suddenly a very different world. And you just get better and better at doing that.
Yeah, because things are still unknown, that
Totally.
the the outcome,
Totally.
when we're in curiosity, but we lose the fear energy.
Totally. I think I've
It's
said
just
many, many times. And I said it to you, and everyone laughs when I say it, but I have no idea what's happening. I have
mhm.
no concept of what is going on really at any moment. Um, and you realize that even with all that I know, I don't know anything. And you just, that becomes just a very freeing place to be, because now if I don't know anything, then there's really no expectations either on me, because I'm literally, I don't know what's going on. I'm just doing what comes to do. And
I I'm very familiar with that feeling that you're describing, and it has become more and more present uh, over the past 5 years. And just to your point that you started with, that this whole discussion that we're having can be very unsettling to the ego. Um,
mhm.
so on my particular path, and maybe this is kind of common, um, there's some terrifying feelings around um, the uncertainty and realizing the identity is a costume,
Yep.
and realizing the identity does not know what is happening next at all, and is not in control of it
Right.
either.
In magical terms, they call that the abyss. The chasm that
Yes.
you're observing right now between the self and letting go to God, everything, is called
Yes.
the abyss. And
Yes.
some travel the abyss and then hold it and don't let go to God. And those are the ones that
Mhm.
close the heart and become the same power as the fourth density ascended, but they're negatively polarized. They've
Mhm.
closed their heart instead of crossing the abyss, letting go of the self, but then coming back and controlling everything. Um, you know,
Yeah, the
yeah,
I think the way I used to see life was that I was the captain of my ship
right,
on
yeah.
the ocean of life. And now the way I see it is I'm a passenger on the ship
Can,
in the ocean of life, and I'm really along for the ride.
I'll share what unity consciousness sort of feels like to
Okay.
me, and in the keeping on the, it's more like you're a wave in the ocean of reality of the universe,
Mhm.
right? The wave moves only as the ocean moves it. Ocean being God, source.
Mhm.
The
Mhm.
wave moves as it moves with life, with the universe, with God. Um, the wave doesn't choose where it's going, it just follows its trajectory. It is an entity in its own right, the wave, but a particular wave, right? And so we could think of ourselves as waves of consciousness. Um, and it does oscillate like waves too, the frequencies of it.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
um, we're waves of vibrating energy that's just flowing through us. And what happens is, though, in order for us to experience like all the ups and downs of what comes with the identity, we have to create an identity, right? So we create that identity, and then in our sort of immaturity, we become confused that that is our identity, plus, or that's our true identity, that's our true beingness. Plus, in this sphere, our society specifically made sure that humans don't know of their divine nature,
Mhm.
right? So there was lots of negative troll oriented programming in
Yeah.
place. So this particular sphere has had a very conflict ridden, experience for a while. And so, um, you know, uh, it's not like our fault or anything. It's you could think of the creators playing sort of a giant chess game. There's light and dark pieces. He's playing with himself, he or she, whatever, however, god, goddess, whatever you want, playing with themselves. You could think of like divine masculine, divine feminine just playing with themselves, right? Almost, because the divine feminine on its own is a negative polarity. Divine masculine on its own is only positive. Neither of them can do anything on their own. there has to be a merging in order for anything to occur.
Hmm.
But anyways,
So
yeah.
I'm wondering if we could maybe end with some practices of just more tuning into this unity consciousness. In the beginning, you talked about one practice of seeing God, the creator, in all beings, in all things. Um, are there other practices
I
that
would
can be
I would
recommended?
add on to that. Um, you can vibrate a ye, Asher, a ye, like a Asher, a is it means I am that I am.
Mm-hmm.
You can vibrate that and know, like just go sort of into a light meditation and just remember the I am presence. So we've done that before, and you remember that feeling, right? The I am presence.
Mm-hmm.
So we go do that on occasion throughout the day. Remind yourself that you're the creator. So add that on to your gazing at the creator. Understand that everything is a reflection. Everything is a mirror of your own consciousness. That's all that you ever experience is your own consciousness. And so everything is just a mirror of yourself, and you're the creator, and everything is you, the mirror of you. And that includes like random vehicles and weird families in a fight beside you in Walmart. It's try to look at everything. It's the rotten fruit at at the Walmart that they're throwing away in like buckets or something. So like it's the nasty stuff, and try to look at stuff that you don't like and go, I'm that too. And you go down that rabbit hole as far as you want to. Caution, that's going to hurt probably. So you're going to look at things, and I don't mean like go observe these things happening. I mean look at societal behaviors or manipulation tactics. Read about some horrible stories about what you have done, right? And see it as this: I have done this. And this helps you to hold compassion for the entirety of the world in as much as you can hold for your own sanity and beingness. And then you just gradually expand that, and just keep you literally just reminding yourself, I'm the creator. I'm the creator. Um, Everything's perfect. This is all the creator. It becomes very difficult to even oppose things.
Mm-hmm.
So you still want to like hang. There's a balancing act that ends up being noticed when you first step into this consciousness. You have a tendency to talk funny, or you might want to stop saying I. You might want to start saying we, because you might feel like you and your higher self are sort of together now. Um, and so you might start to speak like that. We.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it really depends how you're experiencing it, and you may start to have a lot of visions. Lots of like psychotic or psychosis type symptoms, schizophrenic type symptoms.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But likely, if you're into this state, your vibration's really high, so you shouldn't be really doing a lot of stuff that's super freaky. You'll be very weird to everyone, I'm sure. There's suddenly a radiance in you as well
Yeah.
that people never saw before, because if you're holding that consciousness, you have a radiance, and some people are like, whoa, and they really like you. Other people are like, oh my god, I don't like this person. Like it goes all over the place. But because you've usually made a jump, and it's like in a day or something, right? It just happens basically when the
Mm-hmm.
person's ready. They just go, oh, and then they sort of giggle for a while usually. But the change there is so drastic that it becomes a balancing act then to like balance between sanity and and really you realize too, sanity is sort of just what society, what you called, I think, the societal gaze. That's
To
the judge of
compare.
sanity,
Yeah.
really,
Hmm.
in this culture,
Yes.
right?
What we've decided.
Yeah, what we've decided is normative is
Yes.
fine, and anything else is kind of insane.
Yeah.
Where I actually think the insanity is separation. That's insanity. And
Hmm.
Eckhart Tolle talks about this a lot. That
Hmm.
the collective mind is a little bit insane.
Hmm.
It thinks it's separate from each other.
Yeah.
And so that's, I think, why I'm here, is to try and help do that in like a different style, a different type of way.
Yeah.
That's why I always get so excited about unity. Anything to talk about, it's fun.
Yeah. Awesome. Um, I think we may have answered this, but I want to just make sure. Olivia Jane on the chat has a really great question. Do we all eventually merge into source God? If we
Ah,
are part of God, what would be the need to merge?
interesting. Interesting. So I like to think of it like, so the way I described the harvest earlier,
Hmm.
it's almost like we're fruits. Like God's planted a fruit, right, of consciousness, and then he sends it his love and lets it do as its free will does and grows, right? Your consciousness is like that, and then eventually God plucks you and consumes you, and that's the harvest. And so you go through continual harvests of that nature until eventually it's the final harvest, and you're plucked and you merge into source directly and unify with all that is and all that ever was. And that part is a mystery. And this continues over and over, and that's the Big Bang and then the contraction. The universe is like a beating heart that just does this over and over and over for eternity.
Eternally. Hmm. Hmm.
So that's what we mean when we talk about multiverse. Also, this is doing this so much, right? You can imagine how many universes are formed right now, right? It's
Hmm.
infinite.
And through these eternal contractions and expansions, does our particular soul remain somewhat a distinct piece within
It
source?
remains a distinct piece into fourth density, then into fifth density. So in fourth density, it begins to understand love, whether it's love of
Hmm.
self or love of other selves, or service, right? How it's oriented to perform service in fourth density. In fifth density, it learns about wisdom, how to discern better, how to provide the most efficient service, the most beneficial service, whatever. It's applying wisdom to that. And then in the next density, the density that I'm from is uh, unity, or the law of one. This density, the individuation is gone. So there's no individuated self. Well, it's mostly gone. It's not entirely gone, because for it to be entirely gone, you have to merge with source. So in the law of one, they say um, we are one with the creator, yet we are still raw. Therefore, we still seek the creator,
Hmm.
right? So you're still seeking at sixth density, but you're so aware of unity that the self that was like Sean
Hmm.
is pretty gone at that point.
Hmm.
Sean exists as a memory and is sort of experienced by reviewing a memory in time space, or space time.
And then once we do completely merge back into source, but then we do the whole cycle again, does our particular piece of soul come back into the mix?
That is a fabulous question. These are mysteries that I have yet to plunder. Um, my hypothesis is that yes, basically you'll choose to stay or fragment out again.
Hmm.
and you'll do it in a different way. At that point, the self's gone. So like all of this experience of the self has merged into source.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So there's no more chunks of you. You're
Mm-hmm.
everything now. So you then will be a part of the creation of the next octave of the universe, which will be another big bang of your design.
Mm-hmm. But you're saying at least for you, it's a mystery whether in the next iteration we could pull out again as the same particular piece that we were in this first or
It's
this.
entirely likely,
Mm-hmm.
that consciousness that was Tassel
Yeah.
and Tassel's soul and all of that business
Mm-hmm.
uh, is can be seen then as like a template, almost a
Mm-hmm.
memory that can be,
Plucked out again
yeah,
from
plucked
all that
out,
is.
adjusted, put on a different planet,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
whatever. Like you have sort of a matrix of a blueprint to your incarnative experience
Yeah.
that can be duplicated and
Mm-hmm.
shared around the galaxy, whatever, right? So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that's a cool idea that this merging back into source, well, we very likely will just do it all again and perhaps we can pluck out again and this
totally.
eternal
Yeah,
uh
and there are
trickling.
wanderers that are here that are from the last octave of the universe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
according to
So
Ra.
it does so it does seem like that is possible then, that you can come out again in a particular
I think
piece.
that might be what I've done. And
Ah.
then but and so I think I don't know. I don't know.
The
I have no
quote,
idea.
the universe begins and ends in mystery.
Yeah, yeah, like that's something I've wondered about. Like
Hmm.
exactly how old is my beingness?
Yeah.
And I've had there's two issues there. Is one is it's eternal, so the age is sort of irrelevant. But I'm curious, like, what have I experienced so far? Is more what I'm trying to figure out, right?
Hmm.
Um, and I think I've done all the stuff that I know of in this density or these densities up to sixth,
Hmm.
and so seventh, you know, I may have done.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Maybe infinite number of times, even the whole,
Well, that's it.
all the densities. Yeah.
That's where it gets kind of
Interesting.
ridiculous because once the
Yeah.
Sean's gone,
Hmm.
I'm sort of I consider myself all that ever has been
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
many ways, right? And you sort of have to do that to sit into the unity consciousness. So it
Yes.
sort of
Yes.
becomes a bit of an irrelevant thing. But I do
Yeah.
wonder. I wonder at it like was Sean individuated in a different octave and came back, or
Right. Right.
I wonder
Exactly.
about these things. Yeah.
Exactly.
Um,
So interesting. Any final words about unity consciousness?
the law is one.
Ah,
Everything is
very
just a
good.
distortion of this one law. Every
Yeah.
single thing that you see, the
Hmm.
distortion of this law.
Yeah. Beautiful. All right. So, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Stream of Truth. And if you feel inclined, we'd love if you subscribe to our channel. And we also have a wonderful Patreon community, and there's more information about that in the description. And we will be back again very soon.